After taking their scheduled Week 3 bye, the Ohio State Buckeyes return to the main stage of college football to take on the Marshall Thundering Herd at noon Eastern Time this Saturday on Fox. So Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt will be calling Ohio State versus Marshall, where the Buckeyes are about 40-point home favorite. And the last time these two schools met, which was over a decade ago, wasn't a close game either. I know that this game has not yet been played, but the 40-point spread and the fact that Ohio State is one of the best teams in America and Marshall has struggled throughout the years suggests that this will be an Ohio State win. The last time these two schools met was in the final year of the legendary Jim Tressel era back in 2010. Ohio State won this matchup 45-7 then. And I'll leave it at that because that was over a decade ago. And let's be honest, I'm talking about this game because I'm talking about Ohio State and what more they can do to improve against a Marshall team that, look, they're going to beat. Because this was the case with Michigan in 2021 and 2022 and 2023. It's the case with Penn State in a lot of seasons. Ohio State this season, though not in 23 or 22 when they had to play a legitimate Notre Dame team in the first few weeks of the year. When you have these easy out-of-conference schedules, if you have an elite staff, a great staff, and Ohio State does, you use these games to assess the depth and talent of your roster, to assess the potential of your roster, and to rest key starters and not rush them out for them to get injured against a small team when, you need the star players, especially in big games. And for all the flack that Ohio State's gotten about their out-of-conference schedule, their Big Ten Conference schedule is one of the toughest in the conference. Their conference schedule, in my mind, is one of the toughest in the country. They play now an Indiana team that profiles as being one of the nation's most efficient teams. Will they live up to that? We'll see. Rival Michigan's been very competitive over the previous 3 seasons. And as much as Ohio State's dominated the rivalry in the 21st century, Michigan has played in some pretty competitive games, just coming up short. So that'll be a tough game too. Nebraska and Iowa profile as legitimate teams, and then especially playing Penn State and Oregon on the road. You have 6 games where the Buckeyes will be playing teams that are either efficient, have historically played the Buckeyes close, and or have some serious talent on their rosters and coaching staff. So Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, Chip Kelly, Larry Johnson, Tim Walton, James Laurinaitis, and Carlos Lachlan and Brian Hartline are going to be doing their best to prepare this team to be put in a position to win. Before we get into this game and I give you some things that I believe Ohio State should look to improve upon, and also, of course, give a brief deep dive into both of these teams, looking at them from a bird's eye view, because I know you want to know what Marshall is, who they are, even though they'll likely lose by 40 points. I want you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, share this video around to other college football fans, whether they're Ohio State fans, Michigan fans, Big Ten fans, or fans of another Big Ten school, or a non-Big Ten school, pardon me. Share this around to fans who are passionate about the game like we are. And also comment your thoughts and your prediction on this matchup down below. Liking, sharing, subscribing, hitting the bell, all of those things helps us get into the algorithm. So I'd appreciate it very much if you could do that. But again, Ohio State is a 40-point favorite at home. It opened up at 39.5. Not much movement, but really what the question is regarding this game is whether Ohio State is going to do to Marshall what they did to Western Michigan or what they did to Akron. Ohio State's not losing this game. And the statistics really do back that up. When you look at the broad team comparison, FPI and S&P Plus say that Ohio State should be anywhere from really a, 28 to 38, and if you factored in home field advantage, probably like a 31, 32, 33 to a 42, 43, 44, 45 favorite. S&P Plus is more bullish on Ohio State and more bearish on Marshall compared to FPI. In FPI's terms, Marshall is about 1.7 points inferior to the average college football team. Meanwhile, Ohio State is 26.2 points superior to the average college football team. The Buckeyes are ranked 4th in FPI. They're 1st in S&P Plus, where they're viewed as 30.6 points superior to the average college football team. Marshall is a touchdown exactly, 7 points with the extra point, worse than the average college football team per S&P Plus from Bill Connolly. You look at points per play margin, the Buckeyes are number 1 in points per play margin. On average, they score 0.733 more points per play than their opponent. Talk about dominance. That's absolutely insane. I mean, even with the weak strength of schedule, that's Tennessee-level dominance. And I'd say it's greater than Tennessee-level dominance, especially when you factor in Ohio State returning all they do from defense last year, how good Jeremiah Smith has looked as a true freshman, and the fact that they're more talented than Tennessee. And I'm telling you, just from an efficiency standpoint and how dominant Tennessee has been, Tennessee's obviously a top 10 team. And I think the Buckeyes are obviously a top 5-3 team. If not, they could obviously be number 2 or number 1. They're up there with Georgia, with Texas, with Alabama. Marshall, on the other hand, is a 1-1 Sun Belt team. And on average, their opponents score more points per play than they do. Marshall's points per play margin is, on average, negative 0.189. Yikes. Matching them up with one of the most dominant teams in the country. And you're playing in the Horseshoe, which I know it's noon, but Ohio State will still show out because they have one of the biggest and best fan bases in the country. It's no different from, Beaver Stadium or Bryant-Denny Stadium or Sanford Stadium or Michigan Stadium or any of these venues with over 100,000 capacity seats, and you have, just awesome fan bases like all the schools that I mentioned. They're going to show up even if it's a noon game. It won't be the same if it were a 3:30 or 7:30 or 8 p.m. kickoff, but it'll still be intense, it'll still be loud, and the fans are going to have a good time, especially when you're a team like Ohio State that's undefeated. There's dominance, and there's a lot of hype about the season overall. And when you factor in strength of schedule, Ohio State's still dominant. That's what that game control, that little GC metric that you see on the screen is. They're 11th nationally in game control, despite having the 127th toughest strength of schedule, which isn't that tough at all. Marshall has the 84th toughest strength of schedule, so not much tougher than Ohio State. It's because their toughest opponent is Virginia Tech, who lost to Vanderbilt. Doesn't look that good. I expect that Rutgers will beat Virginia Tech this weekend, and Marshall is 69th in game control. Points per play margin is really a measurement of dominance that doesn't factor in strength of schedule, but that kind of sorts itself out at the end of the year when, especially with the Big Ten and the SEC, those conferences are playing pretty comparable strengths of schedule. The SEC as a conference is tougher, and they do play some tough non-conference games, but the Big Ten is a close second, and then when they meet in the playoff, like what you saw last year, you always play top-tier opponents in the playoffs, so that always raises your strength of schedule. Like Michigan had a top 10 strength of schedule last year when they played in the playoff. Ohio State and Michigan in 2022 had pretty good strengths of schedule by the end of the year because, Ohio State played Georgia, Michigan played TCU, Michigan and Ohio State played each other, they both played Penn State, so it all sorts itself out at the end of the year. But this early, game control might be a more useful metric. I'm just hypothesizing that as a might. I'd still prefer points per play margin, but game control factors in strength of schedule along with team dominance. But Ohio State, it just goes to show that even with their first half struggle against Akron, which really was a struggle, and their weak strength of schedule, they still are one of the more dominant teams in all of college football. Marshall, not so much, which is why I think that this will be an Ohio State blowout. I'll get to that in a few minutes when I give my score prediction. But what can Ohio State improve on? This is the main area of focus for any matchup like this. What can the Buckeyes get better at? I think you look at run blocking, you look at rush defense. Those are the areas in which Ohio State has struggled in previously under Ryan Day and also under defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. You look at how I think that Michigan may have a better rushing offense in terms of yards per carry and in terms of explosiveness compared to last year. I think Penn State's rushing attack is going to be more explosive than it was last year and better overall. Oregon is finding their rhythm on the offensive line. And Penn State's defense, it took a hit against Bowling Green, and KJ Winston is sadly going to be out for a long time. Prayers up to him. Hopefully he heals and can play quickly and efficiently and be all healed up. But I think their performance against Bowling Green was a little bit flukish, and I think Bowling Green is a ridiculously good offense for a MAC school. So their defensive line, I believe, is still legit. Just look at what they did to West Virginia, who still has Jaheim White, C.J. Donaldson, a good offensive line, and they shut them down. Michigan's D-line is really effective. Prioritizing trench play, not just for facing off against Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, Nebraska's looking good in the trenches. Iowa's offensive line, I'm telling you, is legit, and their defensive line is as well. Ohio State's going to be playing 5 teams that are going to have anywhere from great to elite trench play. Prioritizing that is critical. Making sure Donovan Jackson and that offensive line are healthy. Same with the defensive line. Making sure that they get as many snaps for those players, again, while keeping things under control and keeping players healthy, but getting as much experience in these games as possible. Ryan Day's a really good head coach. He has built an elite staff, and I think that consequentially you'll see that in this game. You'll see rotations like you did against Akron and Western Michigan, and I think that this team is better in the trenches than it was last year. I mean, they were not 100% on the offensive line in their first 2 games, and large part because of Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, but also because of improvements in scheme and play calling. They look much better on the ground, and they also look pretty good in pass protection. So I say this to say, not that I believe Ohio State's offensive line is bad or their defensive line is bad, but when Akron was able to convert some 4th and shorts, you know that Penn State and Michigan and Oregon and I'd say even Nebraska and Iowa running the football will be able to do that against Ohio State, at least given what we have seen. And you don't want that. Not one bit. It's why Ohio State lost to Michigan last year. If one of those 4th down conversions is stopped, well, given that Ohio State only lost by 6 points, they probably win the game by a point. Because those 4th down conversions by Michigan last year all led to touchdowns. So it's so important on 4th and 3rd and short to be able to stop the run and just to run the ball very effectively against anyone, and especially a smaller team like this. For Michigan to struggle against Fresno State running the ball was a concern. Against Arkansas State, it was good to see, they have a rushing offense. For Penn State, it was the same thing against Bowling Green and also Western Michigan. You see 2 game sample size where Penn State's explosive on the ground. That's encouraging. And for Ohio State, it has been that way so far, particularly against Western Michigan, where Judkins almost had another long rush, if not called back due to a holding call. I think in this matchup, Ohio State covers. I think they win. I think they run for 300-plus yards, probably pass for 200-plus, if not 300-plus. 49-3. Marshall is a better team than Western Michigan. They're probably the best team that Ohio State's played all season long. I don't think it matters because I think Ohio State's on a mission this year. I think they're really good. And even if, because there is a possibility, even if they're overrated, even if they are not the Big Ten's best team, and I think it's clear right now that they have so much talent that they'll blow out these smaller teams and medium teams. I mean, look at 2021 Ohio State, who lost to Oregon at home, who played Nebraska and Penn State competitively, and who nearly lost to Utah in the Rose Bowl and got dominated by Michigan on the road, that team who had a weak defense and some questions on offense on the offensive line and running the football against legitimate defenses, against teams that were not great defensively or not good overall, or at least above average in the case of 2021 Nebraska, they owned teams left and right because they just had that much talent. So I don't think Ohio State's going to struggle in this game. It'll be an easy win. The only thing we may learn more about Ohio State is just how consistent they are. Like, does Will Howard have another good game? Or does he have more of an Akron-type game where he's good but not Ohio State good? How does the run game and the offensive line and the defense, specifically the run defense, look? These questions will be answered to a greater degree against Marshall this Saturday, but they won't be complete because Marshall's not a good team. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thanks to Crash2488 and Brasco Rascal for being Heisman members and sponsoring this video and channel. Thanks to Chris Lane, Connor Little OH, Ismar, Tyler Nye, and Jolton Cush for being All-American members and sponsoring this video and channel. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for being All-Conference members. If you want access to my weekly college football picks, which will be released tonight, sign up as an All-American or Heisman member on my Patreon page, and you will receive access to those. I'm picking well over 30 games because every game that has a Power 4 team in it, in the matchup, I'm picking the spread and I'm picking the winner. You won't want to miss it. And the link to my Patreon page and also my merchandise store, if you want to support the channel, is both in the description and the pinned comment. And also check out our Discord server via those same areas. Have a great day. Go Buckeyes. Go Thundering Herd.